Hey, beautiful souls. I'm Emily, and in this second video about female folkloric creatures or archetypes, I'm going to talk about the dangerous seductress or the femme fatale. So these are creatures that appear beautiful and alluring. They seduce or entice men, almost always men, with their charms, only to kill or devour them or drain away their life force. So where the captive maiden we talked about in the last video is struggling for her freedom, the dangerous seductress is actually seeking to destroy her male prey. She can be a challenging motif to reclaim. She's sometimes been described as misogyny made manifest because of the way this motif has been used against women for many, many years. But she still has important lessons for us if we look for them. The sirens of ancient Greece calling men to their doom are the famous example. So from the Odyssey, your next encounter will be with the sirens, who bewitch everybody who approaches them. There is no homecoming for the man who draws near them unawares and hears the sirens' voices. No welcome from his wife, no little children brightening at their father's return. For with their high, clear song, the sirens bewitch him, as they sit there in a meadow piled high with the mouldering skeletons of men, whose withered skin still hangs upon their bones. The siren in popular imagination is a beautiful, alluring woman who charms men with her irresistible song. She may lure ships onto the rocks or an individual man to a watery grave. Frequently, she's a mermaid, like the mermaid of Galloway in Scotland, who had a seductive and fatal voice. And whoever listened to or went to her never awakened again in this life. But this thinking of the siren as a mermaid is actually quite a recent development. In the Greek folklore tradition, around the time Homer was writing of sirens, they would actually have been half woman, half bird. The early medieval bestiaries describe the siren as a deadly creature who's a human female from head to navel and a bird from the waist down. And it's only later that the medieval church played this role in perpetuating the idea of the siren as mermaid. And they used the image to serve as a symbol of the dangers of the deceitful lures of the flesh. But in Greek myth, the sirens descend from the Muses, who were companions of Apollo, and they were stripped of their wings as punishment for refusing to lie with men. So they're resisting male authority and they're suffering punishment. Their later persecution of males could be seen as revenge, or we could read it as this mythologizing of the displacement of older female deities by patriarchal ones. So what might this original potency have been before they were reduced to these uncomplicated seductresses? Well, a close reading of the original myths suggests that they were actually creatures from the underworld with the power of prophecy, perhaps deriving from the Anatolian vulture goddess. They were originally seen as winged psychopomps, compassionately carrying souls to the afterlife, a lot like the Norse Valkyries. But I digress. Back to the dangerous seductress motif. So in these archetypes of folklore, we can see a splitting of women into good women, chaste maidens, controlled wives, and bad women, seductive, dangerous, and destructive. And these stories invent this link between being female, sexuality, duplicity, and malicious intent. They encourage the policing of women's behaviour by both men and women, for they say that while any woman may seem to be civilized and beautiful from one angle, she's actually uncontrolled, threatening, wild nature underneath. So positioning the sexually liberated woman as an evil temptress is this mythological framing that has been used to justify the control of women. So our dangerous seductress might be the personification of the feminine element of water, like the Slavic rusalka, or she may personify the female-coded forest, like the Swedish skogsra. She might be a hybrid creature, like a mermaid or siren, or an Iranian melmaeus with knives for legs. She may be a shapeshifter that turns from a luring maiden into strangling serpent, like the Japanese mountain witch. Or she may hide devouring teeth in her vagina, which is a trope common all over Asia and the American continent. but she is never what she seems to be, and her intentions are always evil. So, using these tropes, women who fail to distance themselves enough from behaviours considered to be improperly sexual are then classified as being evil and having malicious intent because these are seen as linked. Now, the trap for women in the real world is the temptation to identify as the good woman and condemn the bad woman to distance herself from them, even if she's doing this unconsciously. By doing this, she's just unconsciously trying to ensure her own safety. Maybe she benefits from that benign sexism of chivalry. But this strategy of distancing ourselves from the bad, other type of woman only reinforces this patriarchal model of duality, this splitting of women into good or bad. And in doing this, we give legitimacy to the system that we're trying to subvert. We're also playing into the old divide and conquer. When we agree that some women are bad, but not us, we score an own goal for women everywhere. And of course, we run the risk of then having to repress parts of our own healthy expression of sensuality in order to keep perceiving ourselves as the good type of woman. And for some, this makes it harder to access our own authentic, healthy pleasure. So the dangerous seductress is a projection of fears about women and their power. Perhaps they come from a male fear that the force of attraction that women hold for men will give her power over him. So the bewitching mermaid may drag him to the bottom of the sea. Perhaps it's connected to fears around the seemingly inexhaustible nature of female sexuality. So we get tropes about the succubus or vampire draining men of their life force. There are fears, perhaps, about the vulnerability during the postcoital period. The Iranian mermaidus is a mermaid-like creature who appears as a beautiful woman from the waist upwards, but her legs are like sharp knives or sickles. She'll appear to a man and invite him to lie with her, and then afterwards, while he's asleep and defenseless, she cuts him to pieces with her legs. You see that really playing into this fear of that vulnerable period. Also, the fear of female sexuality can be seen as an expression of the fear of female generative power, the power to create life, which is then closely linked to the fear of death. For example, there's the Swedish forest spirit, the skogsra, who seduces men in the forest only to leave them lost, insane, or ensnared. She sometimes looks like a beautiful maiden from the front, but her back is composed of a half-rotten log. So she appears to be live, but there's this hidden aspect of death, and it's made all the more repulsive by the contrast. This fear of women's power creates a splitting of the original circular life, death, life nature of the primeval goddess into a duality of acceptable versus unacceptable. And there's always this lurking fear that what appears to be a good woman hides a bad woman underneath. This risk of straying into transgression and becoming a fallen woman is always present. The warning motif of a lovely maiden hiding a monstrous true form is therefore a really common one in folkloric tropes of the dangerous seductress. To reclaim the dangerous seductress, we need to reclaim and embody our wholeness. Insist, in fact, on our wholeness. It involves rejecting the idea of good versus bad women and challenging this invented link between female sexuality, duplicity, and evil intentions. It involves embracing the idea of life, death, life as continuous cycle, each dependent on the other, rather than seeing them as opposing forces. The rusalki, the villies, bring fertility to the fields and life-giving rain as well as death and sickness. They are nature in its cyclicity and wholeness. Jane Caputi wrote that the femme fatale represents an outlawed form of female divinity, potency, genius, sexual agency, independence, vengeance, and death power. Rather than repress and fear this potency, perhaps we should instead seek to embrace it wholeheartedly. The seductress teaches us that though we might be demonized for removing the chains of patriarchy, Freedom and wholeness lie outside the shackles. She can be a source of inspiration for challenging conventional standards and expectations, for refusing to judge ourselves or each other. We are neither good women nor bad women, but whole, complex people. Our sexuality is neither to be feared or repressed, but embraced as part of the whole amazing full spectrum of the human experience. When we look with fresh eyes, the sirens constitute a sisterhood of women. They give this vision of female solidarity in groups. They raise their voices in a lament for love and for opportunities lost. They offer deep wisdom for those who are brave enough to die to their old life and be reborn to another. They form this bridge between worlds. Reclaiming the siren's original complexity and wisdom might be one step towards reclaiming their wholeness and agency, and so much more than just an embodiment of projected fears about temptations of the flesh. Perhaps if the siren's song, if women's voices pose a threat to the social order is in need of challenge. If you'd like tools and practices to support you in embracing and fulfilling your own female divinity and potency, do reach out to me via my website. I'd love to be here for your journey. And until then, remember, you are divine, you are loved, you are powerful, with so much love.